Hey guys, Jocelyn here with Fantasia Elegance with another wire-wrapped jewelry tutorial for you. In this video I will be showing you how to make this very elegant pendant design, which is extremely versatile. You can also make it into a pair of earrings. You can use different frame styles and use this same technique, and it's a lot easier to make than it actually looks. Shout out to Dee who did inspire this tutorial idea. In my previous video I mentioned that I do save my little wire scraps to use in future projects, and she said, hey, it'd be kind of fun to see what one of those designs might be that you use those little scrap wires on. Of course, there are lots of ways you can use up little wire scraps. This is just one example of them, but I hope you enjoy it. As far as tools goes, you'll just need your standard round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, and flush cutters, and I will be using both the Xuron Maxi Shear and the Xuron Micro Shear, depending on thickness of wire that I'm cutting in this project. Do feel free to check in the description section below if you're curious for all the exact kinds I'm using, where you can purchase them. All that good stuff is down below. Of course, you'll need some wire as well. As you can see here, I do collect all my little metal scraps. I sort them by kind, so this is all my silver-filled scrap I've been collecting for a while. So what I've done is just rooted through here and pulled out a bunch of little pieces. And I have pulled out all pieces that are about 20 gauge in diameter. Of course, if you don't have a scrap bag, you can still make this by just taking some 20 gauge dead soft wire and cutting it to different lengths. I have pulled out several lengths here. They're ranging anywhere from about 2 inches all the way down to 1 inch in length. And what we're going to be doing is shaping all these little pieces and putting them onto a frame, so you do need some thicker wire as well for the frame. For that I will be using 16 gauge round dead soft, again in silver filled. I do buy pretty much all my wire at riogrande.com. People seem to ask that a lot. And then finally we'll just need some really fine gauge wire to bind everything together. I'm going to be using sterling silver 28 gauge round dead soft wire. Of course, if you have scraps of different types, you know, square wire, twisted wire, you can use that as well. It'll work too. And finally, I will just be using a small little teardrop briolette gemstone here to ornament the final design, and mine is going to be just about, it's like 14 millimeters long and about 10 millimeters wide. And I buy most of my gemstones like this on Etsy actually. This one is a purple colored quartz. So the first thing I'm going to do here is take my thickest wire, the 16 gauge, and I'm just going to straighten off a length of this using my jewelry polishing cloth as I go. That'll remove any tarnish that's built up in storage. And that will also help me straighten this out so I can cut a little length. And I'm just going to cut about a 6-inch piece of this. Doesn't have to be exact, but that's about what I'm going to be working with. And this is going to be our frame that we'll be adding everything onto. And for this one, what I'm going to do is just start putting in a nice round shape. So I'm going to use my ring mandrel. If you have any round object like a nail polish bottle or whatever, you can shape it around that. It'll work equally well. I'm just going to start putting in, you know, kind of a general round shape, maybe about 1 inch in diameter. So I'm going to slide that down a little bit further. I'm just going to cross the tails over each other so that we have something like this. And I want it to be a little bit wider, so I'm just going to spread it out a bit as well. Just kind of play with it until I like the shape and the size that we've got going on. Alright, so we've started forming our round frame, and we're going to use these two tails to put a little bail on top. So where these wires cross over each other, I'm just going to bend both the tails directly upwards towards the top. So there's one bent up, here's the other one. So that we have something about like that. And now we're going to start putting a little loop in the top of these to be the bail. So first I'm going to bend these both forward, maybe a little less than 1/4 inch up from the bottom of that circle shape. So I'm just going to bend them both towards the camera here, put in a little angle like that. Okay, and then we're going to pull out our round nose pliers. I'm just going to start wrapping this around kind of a thicker part of my round nose pliers to put in a little loop at the top. So like that, and we'll do it with the other one as well. And you do want to make these as symmetrical as you can. So I'll just get the rough shape in and compare it for any little tweaking that needs to be done. So this one on the left is looking a little bit bigger than the other one. So I'm just going to bend that down a little more. Alright, and once I've got the rough shape in, I'm just going to use my flush cutters to trim this extra tail off right where it meets the bottom there. We'll do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers and grip this point right here where this little straight bit and the tail meet. I'm just going to flatten the tail out next to the straight portion, because we're going to be wrapping a thinner wire around there and we want everything to sit nicely together. So let's do the same thing on the other side. We're just kind of creating an area where we can wrap everything together. So we have something like that now, generously sized bail. And what I'm going to do now, I actually kind of want to bind this together with 24 gauge wire instead of 28 gauge wire. I think that'll look a little bit better. So pulling out some 24 gauge round dead soft wire, I'm just going to cut real quick like a 2.5 inch piece of this. Okay, we'll just use that to bind everything together here. So I'm just going to wrap it around that point, cross the tails over each other using my chain nose pliers. I'm just going to start pulling those ends tightly together and wrapping them around. Okay, we want to put probably at least 5 or 6 good wraps in here to make sure everything is secured together. I'm just tightening it down with each pass that we do. And once you're running out of room on your tails, I will just take them around to the back. Just snip them off and kind of find a little place where I can tuck down those ends. You might need to snip off a little excess. So this one end I'm just going to tuck in this space right here on the back where I can kind of hide it, using my chain nose pliers to push it on down and checking with my fingers that there's no little pokey bit that can catch. For this other tail, I'm going to kind of do it on the side here. Again, just pushing it down against those larger wires and trying to hide it as best as I can. There we go. So that is our frame that we've made with a little bail on top. You can hammer this out lightly if you like. I find that with the 16 gauge wire it's plenty sturdy enough without hammering, so I will just skip that and go ahead as it is. So at this point we're going to pull out all our little scrap wires that we have already acquired here. And I'm just going to start with the longest one and kind of work my way down, and we're going to shape some little fun swirls and things with these. So let me take this piece that's about 2 inches long, and what we're going to do with this one is, using our round nose pliers, I'm going to grip right in the middle of it. I'm going to cross these tails over each other all the way so that I've made a little loop right in the center. Okay. And then I'm going to put some little swirls on either side. So I'm just going to get 2 flush ends on either side, and using the very tips of my round nose pliers, I'm going to start putting an open swirl in here, going towards the center. So that we get that kind of shape. And I'll do the same thing on the other side so that it's symmetrical. Okay, so again, an open swirl going towards the center. So there's our first shape that we're going to make. We'll set that aside for now. Let's take our second longest pieces. I believe these ones were about 1 3/4 inches. Yep, that looks about right. Okay, I'm going to get some flush ends on these as well. And for these, I'm going to start on one end and start putting a little open spiral in. So again, I'm using a combination of my round nose pliers here, and I'm holding the wire in my left hand to stabilize it, so that as I twist with my round nose pliers, I start putting in this shape. There we go. And now right below that little swirl we made, I'm just going to grip kind of midway down my round nose pliers, and let's just wrap this tail all the way around, like that. so that we've put a little loop below it. And then let's use this little tail here to put in another open spiral, a little bit smaller this time, and I'm going to turn this open spiral until it touches that loop we made. And I'm switching over to my chain nose pliers now because I need to refine this shape a little bit. What I'm going to do, because I don't have as much to work with now, I'm still holding with my left hand the shape that we have made already. I'm just going to use my tweezer nose pliers to start putting in more of that shape. Alright, so we've got that kind of thing now. Let's go ahead and make another of these with our other 1 3/4 inch length of wire. So again, putting in an open spiral. And then right below that, we're going to wrap this all the way around. And then using this last tail to do another little open spiral. And you don't really have to copy exactly what I'm doing. The key is to just make some fun little shapes with our wire bits that we have and do some different kinds of ones to have some nice variety. So you can really do your own shapes, whatever strikes your fancy. But this is just what I'm doing. Alright, so we've got those shapes now. Let's do some just really simple little spirals. So I'm moving on to the kind of 1 1/4 inch pieces now. And for these, I'm just going to do some really simple little S shapes. So starting on the end, putting in an open spiral one way, and then we'll switch to the other end and put an open spiral going the other way. Okay, so that we have some of these little S shapes, and I'm going to make a few more of these with my remaining pieces of wire. I may not even need all of these. I'm going to set some of them aside because I may not need that many, but I'm going to make a few more of these simple S shapes, okay? Alright, so here's what I have so far for shapes. I've got this one with a loop in the middle and some swirls on either side. I've got 4 of these S swirls, 2 slightly larger, 2 slightly smaller, and then 2 of these little shapes here. Let's see if we can make it work with this. We might need to make a few more as we're going. And again, like I said, you can really make whatever shapes strike your fancy. But basically what I like to do at this point is start planning out where I'm going to place these on our frame. So I'm just going to pull out some scratch paper here. I'm going to take our frame that we made and just trace around it lightly with a pencil so that I can get the kind of same size and shape of thing that we have to work with here. So I always like to start with the largest pieces, so I'm going to place this one on the bottom, kind of centered. Let's see how that looks. And then these are going to be my next largest pieces. And you don't even have to make something that's symmetrical if you don't want to. I'm just going to play around with it here and see what I like. And I think I'm going to push these up a little bit instead. Let's try flipping them around and see what looks best. So once I've kind of got the larger pieces down, it can be a little tricky to actually stack these smaller ones on top, but I do want to have it layered. So what I'm going to do is just kind of set them off to the side where I think I'm going to want them. So I think I'll put these 2 big swirls. They'll actually be on top like that. But it's a little hard to get them to stay there, so I'm just going to set them off to the side for now. And then I may not even need these smallest little swirls, but let's go ahead and tentatively put them up here. We'll get the first layer on and see what we think. Alright, so that's kind of the layout I'm going to do right now. So I'm just going to take this center bottom portion and we'll attach that one first. And I'm going to move this so that it's out of the way and you can see what I'm doing. But I would leave this set up normally as I'm working so that I have something to go off of. So to attach this to our frame, we are going to use some 28 gauge wire. So I'm just going to wind off a little bit of that so that we can cut a length of it. And I'm kind of at the end of a spool here, so it's a little bit messy, don't mind that. It doesn't really matter how much you cut because we're going to be splicing in little pieces as we need them. I'm just going to go with kind of a 6-inch piece to start with because it's a little bit easier to work with shorter pieces rather than longer pieces. I'll just snip that off. And then the first piece that you put on is always the hardest, so I'm going to use my left hand to kind of position this where I want it and stabilize it. And I'm going to look for places where this little shape crosses over the base wire, because that's where we're going to want to put our bindings, our initial bindings. So right away I'm seeing here's a good spot where those two wires cross over each other. There's another one up here, and of course on the other side as well. So what I'm going to do is kind of take the middle of our little binding wire. I'm just going to drop it over one of those points, and I'm going to start wrapping it around. Okay, and you can feed it up through the frame. I want to put 2 good wraps around that point right there. Okay, and it's not really secure yet, so I'm still using my left hand to hold it together. And then what I'm going to do is take this 28 gauge weaving wire. I'm just going to spiral it around the base wire to move it to the right until it gets to this point where the wires cross over each other again. And to do that, I do need to feed it down through this space right here. So we'll just do that, pulling it tight as we go. And let's move it down so that it's off of that shape a little bit. Pulling it tight. So we're kind of just using it to travel now along the frame. Bring it up through the center again. And I'm double checking as I go that this loop is centered below the bail where I wanted it to be. Alright, now that we have traveled along that frame, we've gotten to the point more or less where these wires cross over each other. So I'm just going to connect them again at that point. So again, wrapping it around both our little swirl that we're placing on top and around the frame. Get 2 wraps at that point. I'm pulling it nice and tight as we go. And I'm double checking that this is still sitting where I want it to. Looks pretty good. And just to secure this, I'm going to wrap this once or twice just around the frame. Okay, and we'll put that off to the side for now. This little tail, we're not going to use him for now, but we might use it later. So I've kind of started securing the right hand portion of this swirl. Let's do the same thing with the left hand portion. So we've got this left hand tail. I'm just double checking this loop is still below the bail. Everything's in line. And I'm going to do the same thing, kind of helping it travel this along the frame. So tucking it down through this space, I'm just going to spiral it around the frame wire a few times. Now I've gotten to the center little loop here. I think I will connect that to the frame as well. So going down through that little loop. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. As long as you get the job done of connecting your pieces together in a secure way, it doesn't really matter how you do it. And now I'm just going to go around the frame wire if I can. Let's turn this upside down temporarily. That might make it easier to work with. Just going to put 1 wrap around just the frame. And let's do another one, connecting this loop to the frame. There we go. Alright, and continuing to travel this 28 gauge wire by spiraling it around the frame until we get to our next connector point, which is going to be right here. Alright, and at this point we're just mirror imaging what we did earlier, so I'm just spiraling this around the frame a couple times until we get to our next connecting point, and then we will wrap it to connect these guys together. Pulling it nice and tight there, and let's get 2 good wraps in at that spot. There we go, and I have just enough of the tail to tuck it down, wrapping it around just the frame wire once. There we go. So we have connected our first little shape like that. Let's go ahead and start doing the next one. So next on our layout we had this piece attached right here. So at this point I already have this little spare wire tail coming off, so I'm going to start working with that. So again, I'm going to lay this where I want it to sit. I'm going to look for connecting points that I can use, and right away I see one at the bottom of this little spiral here. So I'm actually just going to feed it over that wire we already have. So he'll sit right there, and we can use this wire to start wrapping it on. And we'll just wrap it around our frame once or twice here. Alright, and let's see where our next good connector point would be. I'm thinking right here where this little swirl meets that loop. Those both cross over the base wire, the frame, so we could probably use that. So let me bring this around behind our little 28 gauge wire. I'm going to bring around behind. I'm just going to tuck it up through that space right there. And then I will feed it back down, going around that wire, pulling it nice and tight. We'll do that again. And this should be connecting it to our frame for us. Alright, and you might be seeing that our shape isn't really lining up perfectly with our frame. That's fine, that'll happen. What I'm just going to do is adjust it as we go. So I want to hold it firm with my left hand, the parts that I like, so I like how this lower part is sitting. And then I'm just going to use my tweezer nose pliers to kind of refine this little swirl a little bit so that it follows our frame shape more closely how I want it to. Okay, just a little refining there. And I'm going to continue attaching this with our 28 gauge wire. So I think we can put another connecting point in right here. I'm going to feed it up through and put some more wraps in right here. And then we might just have enough wire to do... Well, no, I don't think we quite have enough wire left. So I'm just going to finish this wire off by wrapping it around just the frame a couple times to secure it. And then we'll just attach some more 28 gauge wire to continue attaching things. So I'm just pushing that end on down against the frame there. And let's go ahead and cut another little length of our 28 gauge wire. Maybe another 6-inch piece or so, just because that's a convenient length to work with. And let's use this one now to connect this portion right here. So I'm just going to feed it through there and start using the longer end of it to wrap around here. And then let's wrap this around the frame a couple times to secure that end. And this shorter end we do want to secure somewhere as well. So let's see what we can do with that. And I'm thinking we can just feed it up through here to wrap it around our frame a couple times. So let's go down through the middle now. Yeah, I'm actually going to leave that there for now because I might be able to use it in the future. So at this point we've attached two pieces. I want to do the other piece like this on the opposite side so that it's somewhat symmetrical, just like that. That's what we're aiming to do. So let's cut another piece of our 28 gauge wire. I really just cut these as needed. So another about a 6-inch piece. You can cut longer pieces if you want to have to splice fewer wires on, that would be fine. I just find that it's easier to work with slightly shorter lengths so that you're not feeding really long pieces of wires through things. Alright, so as you can see, I've attached this left-hand identical shape, and we do have 4 little wire tails now from all the connecting bits we've used. I'm just saving these instead of wrapping them off yet, because they might come in handy for attaching the next layer. So now what I want to do is start layering on top of what we've got going on right here. So I'm just going to take some of these little S-shaped swirls that we made, and just kind of see if there's a spot where I like them to sit. I think that was one of the smaller ones. Let me pull out one of the slightly larger ones. And I'm kind of liking it sitting right here on top of all that. And I am going to need some more wire, so once again I'm just going to cut a little length of this 28 gauge wire that we can use here. And just like before, I'm going to kind of hold it over the spot where I want it to go and envision potential connecting points for it. I'm thinking there's going to be a good one right in the middle right here. So I'm just going to bend this in half, our little weaving wire. I'm going to drop it over that middle point so that we can start attaching it on here. So crossing those over. Bringing it up through the middle and pulling nice and tight. And let's look for more connecting points we can use. Maybe right here. So let's feed that down through. There's no right or wrong way to do this, like I said. As long as you're connecting everything together in a sturdy way, you do not have to do it exactly how I'm doing it. Let's put 2 wraps in this point. There we go. Okay, so that's more secure at the top. Let's start using this lower tail. I'm just going to change orientations on this a little bit. Let's start using this lower tail to connect things here. So I think we can feed it down through this space right here to connect that point. Do one more. I like to do 2 wraps side by side at each point where I'm connecting things. I think that looks pretty good. I do want to wrap this a couple more points. Let's do maybe, let's actually bring it up through here and see if we can do a wrap through this space. And don't get too lost trying to follow the exact points where I'm wrapping it. This is really just teaching you a style rather than an exact pendant to copy, because these do wind up kind of being one of a kind, just based on where you wrap them in particular. Alright, I'm just testing that's feeling more secure there. I think it could use a bit more on this top area though. So let's actually pull in this little tail over here that we haven't used yet. Let's first feed it up through here so it's positioned more where we want it to be. And then let's start wrapping it there. Alright, so for this one I just want to finish it off. I'm going to snip off there and push that little tail down behind to secure it. Smushing it on down. I think we want to finish off this one as well, potentially. So let's wrap it once more around this point here. I think I'm just going to go down through there. And going around to the back of the design. I'm just going to snip him off in an unobtrusive spot on the back. And tighten that on down. Okay, so that's what we've got now. And I want to do the same thing, placing another of those little S spirals in the same point on the opposite side. So at this point I want to evaluate if I want to add any more little swirls or if I like how it's looking. So what I could do is add some more little swirls on top here in these spaces, which isn't bad. I do like how that looks, and I could even encase this whole frame like this, but I also like how it looks to kind of just have this portion on the bottom of it. So I think I'm going to stop right there. You could absolutely layer more on. Like I said, fill in this whole frame with the swirls if you want to, but I kind of like how this is looking as is. So I'm just going to take these tails and wrap them around the frame one more time each, And I do have more wire here than I wound up needing. That's okay, that'll go back in the scrap bag. And we'll just push that on down against the frame. Same thing on the other side, snipping off the end so that we can push it down against the frame. Ideally you want it to end in the back. There we go. So as you can see, this is very pretty as is. You could stop right here, but I do want to add a little wrapped briolette below it. So you kind of get a twofer here for tutorials. I will be showing you how to add a little wrapped briolette as well. Basically, I'm going to take this same 28 gauge wire we've been working with this whole time. I'm just going to take about maybe a 10-inch piece of this or so. And I'm going to feed this through the drilled hole in my briolette. And I want most of the length to be on one side here. So I've got maybe 2 inches or so on this left-hand side. I'm going to cross the tails over each other. And this shorter one, I'm going to bend straight up. And the longer one, I'm going to bend off to the side. So we've got something like that now. And let's just wrap this longer one around a couple times to secure it. Now we want to make a little loop to connect onto our design. So to do that, I'm going to pull out my round nose pliers. I'm just going to bend this off behind and put a little loop in the top. Okay, so I've wrapped that all the way around. And then I'm going to feed this through where I want it to sit on my design. So we'll just pop him through there. I'm checking that I like the length of where it's hanging, which I do. So then I'm going to smush that loop closed with my chain nose pliers, my little tweezer nose pliers. And I'm just going to hold over top of that loop that we shaped. Alright. And then you can take your round nose pliers, or if you have a second set of chain nose pliers, you can use those. I'm just going to wrap this shorter tail. Let's get this longer one out of the way. I'm just going to wrap this shorter tail around that space several times. Just wrapping it several times around to secure it. Alright. So at this point, everything's secured. We just need to deal with our little tails. So going back to the longer one, I'm just going to start wrapping this downwards, going over the top of the stone. So I'm going to keep wrapping it. Each wrap I'm going to place right next to the previous one. I'm just working my way down, going over the tip top of this stone. And you might need to use your chain nose pliers to help with shaping this, that's okay. Alright, so I've wrapped this a bunch of times around the top of the stone, going down, and we're getting a little short on the tail, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do now is wrap this back up towards the top. So I'm just going to take it around behind. I'm kind of spiraling it around up towards the top as I go. So that it's back up at the top now. And I'm just going to wrap it around the very top a couple times to secure it. Okay. Once that's secure, we can snip off a little bit of this excess and push it down flat. We do still have one end left to deal with here, so I'm just going to wrap this a couple more times for insurance purposes, if you will. Make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And then we will snip that one off as well. And push the end on down. Okay, so that is one way to make one of these kind of wrapped top briolettes. You may have seen them around in different designs. That's just one way to do it. So that is our pendant design. As you can see now, it's just as easy as putting your favorite chain through the bail here and you're good to go. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, you could also make this into earrings by making a second one. You might want to make it a little bit smaller, do a second pair. Instead of this bail on top, you could just do a simple little closure and put your favorite ear wire through there. This design is very pretty with different frame shapes and styles. As you can see with this one here, I used kind of a more marquee or leaf shape frame. Same idea, but different shape. I filled in the whole frame with those swirls instead of leaving part of it clear, and I hung the stone on the inside instead of on the bottom. So another good style you can do there. Let me lay these out here so you can see them a bit better. And then for this other one, I did kind of an asymmetrical look. I went with a square frame, square stone hung in the center. It's kind of a cushion shape, square cut drilled through one diagonal corner, as you can see there. And I went with the more asymmetrical look. I thought that was kind of fun with the square one. As you can see, same kind of idea, same way to make it, lots of different effects you can achieve. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it is kind of a little springboard for your own creativity and your own designs, and maybe it will help you use up some of those scraps that you have been collecting for a little while. If you did enjoy this tutorial and found it helpful, please do leave me a like and comment below. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you're subscribed and have clicked that little notification bell to turn on all notifications so that you can be told when I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the comments section below. In the meanwhile, happy crafting!